Hello. Welcome back, friends, to God's Story Channel. It's good to see you here again, sharing a bit of your day with us. I hope life's been kind to you, that your health is treating you well, and that the winds have blown a little luck your way. Maybe a touch of success, too, because let's face it, we could all use a bit of that. Now let's settle in. Take a deep breath and shake off the dust of the day. You're here, and that's enough. This place, this moment, it's yours. And today, we're diving into something as old as time itself. Faith. Not the kind that comes wrapped up with a bow, but the quiet sort that hides in the corners, waiting to be noticed. It's easy to talk about faith, but real faith, that's something else. It's a stubborn thing, like a good dog at your side, loyal even when you don't deserve it. We're going to talk about how that faith has carried people through storms, through fires, through the moments when hope felt far off. So lean in. I think you'll find a piece of yourself here. After all, this story isn't just theirs, it's yours too. Let's begin. God's reassurance across time. Faith is that thing you don't see, but you feel it. Like the rhythm of a heart beating, like the tide rolling in at dusk, it's there. And Hebrews spoke of it long ago. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. The people in those early days clung to it. They held it in their hands, even when the world around them was falling apart. They had something we might not recognize in our day-to-day lives, a faith so firm that it stood against the fire of doubt. Think of those early Christians under the Roman Empire's thumb. Historians like Tacitus wrote about them. They weren't rich or powerful. They had faith, which was enough. They were hunted and persecuted, but they kept going. What kept them going was more than words on a page. It was something deeper, something you feel and can't explain. In their hidden rooms and whispered gatherings, they found strength not in armies or wealth, but in faith, the invisible, the unbreakable. That faith was their shield, their weapon, and their peace. And it's the same faith we search for, the same one that endures, past time and distance. Faith is as old as the hills, and it's never left. It remains, calling us to trust what we cannot see, to lean on what's beyond our understanding. And so we lean, but it takes trust, real trust. Trust, as Proverbs speaks of, is trust that brings us closer, closer to something larger than ourselves. Trust that leads us, even when we can't see the path ahead. This is where we begin. Trust in God's guidance. There is a kind of trust that doesn't come easily. It's not something you can hold in your hands or touch with your fingertips. It's not something you're born with. It builds over time. Proverbs say, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your understanding. It sounds simple, but real trust, trust that goes deep, is something earned in moments of doubt when there's nothing else to turn to. It's what you have when everything you thought you knew falls apart. Take Martin Luther King Jr. standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He wasn't a man without fear. He wasn't a man without doubts. But he had a trust not just in himself, not just in the people standing with him, but in something larger, something beyond any one man or woman. He stood there knowing that what he faced was bigger than him. He faced crowds, faced threats, faced a history of wrongs that went back centuries, and he knew he couldn't fix it all alone. But he trusted that if he took a step forward, there would be another behind him to meet him there. Trusted that his words, his actions would ripple out, that maybe they'd change the world. And that kind of trust, he had to fight for it. When he spoke as a man who'd been pushed to the edge of his faith, pushed to that point where trust isn't a choice, it's a lifeline. And in that place, you're no longer leaning on your understanding. You've let go of the plans you thought you could make, the things you thought you could control. You're past all that. You're walking out over open air, trusting there's something there to hold you up. You trust because there's nothing else left to do. And maybe that's what trust is. It's not neat, it's not clean, it's rough, it's raw, and it's hard. But when you get there, it's like a weight is lifted. You don't have to have all the answers anymore. You don't have to pretend you know where you're going or how you're getting there. You're trusting in something unseen, something you can't measure, but it's there all the same. We can't see the end, not always, but we trust that there's more. Trust that we're part of something bigger, something beyond us. And if we can lean into that trust, if we can let ourselves believe that there's more than what we see, then maybe we'll find a path, even if it's not the one we expected. Trust isn't just something you do, it's something you become. You learn to trust the journey, even if the way ahead is uncertain, because you're not walking alone, not now, not ever. Gratitude and inner peace. There's a quietness to gratitude, a calm that seeps in like the first light of morning. It doesn't shout, doesn't demand to be noticed, it just is. In 1 Thessalonians, we're told, give thanks in all circumstances. And maybe that's where the real challenge lies. Not in the easy moments, but in the ones that test you, where you have to dig deep just to find a single thing worth holding on to. Gratitude isn't about counting blessings like coins, stacking them up to see how rich you are. It's not about what you can tally on paper. It's about looking around you, even on the hardest days, and finding something, a single leaf, a breath of clean air, a kind word that makes it feel a little less heavy. The Japanese have a word for it, shikataganai. It means acceptance. They don't fight against what can't be changed. Instead, they honor it and make peace with it. And there's a certain gratitude that grows out of that acceptance, a way of seeing things for what they are, without needing them to be anything else. In the quiet villages of Japan, people bow to each other in gratitude as they pass, not because they owe anything, but because there's a shared understanding of life's fragility, of moments that can slip unnoticed if you're not careful. And that's gratitude in its simplest form. It's not always a grand display. Sometimes it's just a nod, a small acknowledgement that we're here, breathing, alive for another day. When you stop and look at what's around you, gratitude sneaks in. You feel it in the little things, the things that often go unnoticed, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the steady ticking of a clock. In those small, quiet moments, you find a kind of peace, and it doesn't have to be loud. Peace rarely is. It's there in the stillness, waiting for you to notice. Gratitude isn't about escaping the hard parts of life. It's about embracing them, seeing them as part of the whole, knowing that the dark days make the bright ones shine all the more. In places like the Appalachian Mountains, folks have a saying, if you don't appreciate the rain, you won't enjoy the sunshine. It's a simple truth, a reminder that life's hardships and blessings are woven together. So give thanks, not because everything is perfect, but because there's always something worth noticing, something that brings you back to the center. Give thanks, not despite life's rough edges, but because of them. And in that gratitude, you find peace, not the kind that shouts and leaps, but the kind that settles in, as steady as the earth beneath your feet. God's strength, through faith strength, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with a crash. Real strength is something you find when there's nothing else to hold on to, when you're down to the bare bones of hope, and there's only faith to keep you upright. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all this through him who strengthens me. It sounds simple, almost too easy, but strength like that isn't born in a day. It's forged in hardship, in silence, and in the moments when you're alone with nothing but faith. Corrie 10. Boom knew that kind of strength. She was a woman who saw the worst that humanity could offer, a woman who lived through hell and kept her faith. In Nazi-occupied Holland, she helped hide Jews, saving them from a fate she would later face herself. She was captured, locked away, and stripped of her home, her family, and almost everything she held dear. But not her faith, that she held on to with both hands. And when she was at her lowest, when the walls of that concentration camp closed in on her, she found strength, not from herself, but from a belief that went deeper than fear, deeper than hatred. Strength, she found, was quiet. It didn't need to shout. It was the thing that kept her breathing, kept her standing. She could have let the darkness take her. She could have given up, but she didn't. She knew there was a power beyond the walls, beyond the cruelty around her. And in that power, she found enough strength to forgive the very people who'd wronged her, to see them as more than enemies. Forgiveness takes a strength that most people don't understand. It's easy to hold on to anger, to wrap yourself in the warmth of resentment. But strength isn't about clenching your fists. It's about letting go. It takes that hurt and sets it aside, knowing it no longer has power over you. And that's what faith gives you. It doesn't promise an easy path, but it gives you the strength to walk it, even when every step is uphill. Faith teaches you to stand tall, even when the world tries to bend you down. People think strength is something you're born with, but they're wrong. Strength is something you learn, something you find when the world has taken everything else away. It's there in the quiet, moments when it's just you and God and nothing else. When you've been to the edge, when you've looked into the darkness and come back, that's when you know real strength. Not the kind you see on the outside, but the kind that holds you steady, that lets you stand even when you think you can't take another step. That's the strength God gives, and it's the only kind worth having. Overcoming struggles through divine support life has a way of testing you, breaking you down piece by piece until you're sure there's nothing left. It throws its hardest punches when you least expect it. Jesus knew this, and he didn't sugarcoat it. In John 16:33, he said, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." It's an honest promise, not one that says you'll be free of pain, but one that tells you there's something more. Something beyond the struggle, a strength that won't be shaken. Think of places in this world where struggle is a part of life, where hope feels like a luxury. The Middle East, for instance. Countries torn apart by conflict, homes reduced to rubble. And yet, if you go there, if you look into the eyes of the people who live through that every day, you see something unexpected. You see resilience. You see faith. They don't know when or if peace will come, but they hold on to the belief that one day things will be better. They're not waiting passively, they're enduring actively. It's a strange thing, resilience. It doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in hardship, in the cracks where most people would break. It's not loud or proud, it's quiet, steady, unrelenting. It's a mother carrying her child across miles of desert, hoping for a better life. It's a father standing guard through the night, protecting what little he has left. They're not heroes in the stories we read, but they're heroes in the lives they lead. This kind of resilience, this strength, isn't something you can teach. It's something you learn by surviving, by getting up every day and facing what comes next. It's rooted in the belief that there's more than just this moment of pain. It's faith in something unseen, a promise that trouble doesn't have the final say. And that's what Jesus meant. Not that life would be easy, but that with faith, you could face it all and keep going. When you think of overcoming, it's easy to picture a victory, a moment of triumph. But overcoming isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's just about enduring, about holding on when everything around you is falling apart. It's about having the strength to keep going, not because you know the way forward, but because you know there's something guiding you, something stronger than the world. In the darkest places, faith shines brightest. It's the glimmer of hope in a bombed-out city, the quiet prayer whispered in the night. It doesn't take away the pain, doesn't erase the scars, but it's there, like a steady flame, reminding you that you are not alone. You were never meant to face this alone. And maybe that's the point. Life will test you. It will push you to your limits. But with faith, with trust in a strength beyond yourself, you can endure. You can face whatever comes and know, deep down, that you will overcome, even if the victory isn't obvious, even if it's just the courage to take one more step. Practical steps for a blessed life. Sometimes faith doesn't look the way you'd expect. It's not always grand gestures or miracles. Often it's the small, quiet acts, the things that no one notices but make all the difference. John 14:15 says, "If you love me, keep my commands." These are simple words, but they hold a whole world of meaning. Because love, real love, shows itself in actions, not just in words. It's easy to say you believe, but it's another thing to live it day by day. Look at St. Francis of Assisi, a man who had every reason to live a comfortable life. He had wealth, status, and everything laid out before him. But he saw something more. He walked away from it all, chose poverty over privilege, and dedicated himself to God's work. It wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous. He spent his days serving the poor, mending what others had left broken, reaching out to those forgotten by the world. And through that simple obedience, he found a life richer than any he could have imagined. Obedience is a hard word, but it's a true one. It means bending your will and setting aside what you want for something greater. It's letting go of the need to control, the desire to have everything your way. You don't do it because it's easy. You do it because it's right. And in that obedience, you find a kind of freedom you didn't know was possible. It's not a heavy burden. It's a lightness that comes from knowing you're following a path set before you. Faith isn't about what you believe in your mind. It's about what you live in your heart. And that's where the small things come in. The moments when no one's watching, the choices that don't seem to matter much but add up to something greater. Serving others, sharing kindness, holding back your anger, offering forgiveness. These are the pieces that build a blessed life, bit by bit. In those quiet acts, you find yourself closer to God. You find that every time you choose humility over pride, patience over anger, love over hate, you're taking a step closer to the person you were meant to be. It's not a path with shortcuts or easy answers. It's a road paved with moments of choice, of deciding who you are and what matters most. And maybe that's where the real blessing comes from. Not from what you receive, but from what you give. It's in the hands that help, the heart that forgives, the mind that stays clear and focused on what's true. It's in living a life that speaks of love louder than any words could. So take those steps, not because someone's watching or because you're looking for a reward, but because it's what love demands. And in the end, you'll find that the blessings come not in what you've gathered, but in what you've given, in the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a faith well kept, and a love that speaks without saying a word. Faith in family and community. There's a saying in Africa, Ubuntu. It means, I am because we are. It's the idea that a person's life isn't meant to stand alone, that we're shaped and held by the people around us. Ephesians 4:32 echoes it. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. In the end, faith isn't something you hold close to keep to yourself. It's something you pass along, like a torch lighting another in the darkness. Think about family, the way they're always there, whether you want them to be or not. There's something binding in blood, something that runs deeper than words. In the quiet moments when everything else falls away, family is what's left. They see you at your best, your worst, and everything in between. It's in those moments that faith gets tested and strengthened. It's in the way a mother prays over her children, the way a father works to keep food on the table. There's faith in every act, in every sacrifice. And then there's a community, the larger family we find ourselves part of. You see it in small towns where people come together for births, weddings, and funerals, where they stand by each other when the storms roll in. They don't have to, but they do because it's who they are. Faith is not just an individual journey. It's something that binds people and connects them through the highs and lows of life. When you help your neighbor, you're doing more than lending a hand. You're carrying a piece of their burden. There's a strength in that, a quiet resilience. People hold each other up, stepping in when things get hard. Faith thrives there, in the spaces between people. It doesn't need to be preached from a pulpit. It's spoken in every act of kindness, every moment of understanding. It's in the way communities rally, in the way they come together to rebuild after loss. This is what faith in family and community looks like. It's not glamorous or grand. It's the casserole delivered to a grieving widow, the hand on your shoulder when you're facing something too big to bear alone. It's people who know your faults and love you just the same, who see your struggles and stand by you anyway. When you live with others, you learn that faith isn't always about the self. It's about giving, sharing, and being there in ways that aren't always comfortable or easy. And that's what makes it strong, because faith, when shared, multiplies. It becomes bigger than any one person, stronger than any one voice. So hold on to that. Find faith not just in the quiet moments alone, but in the hands you hold, the people who walk with you. Let your life be a light that guides others, not because you're perfect, but because you're present. Because at the end of the day, we are here for each other, and in that, faith finds its deepest roots. Embracing purpose and divine favor. The purpose is a quiet thing. It doesn't shout or make a scene. It waits for you in the silent spaces, in the questions that linger when everything else fades. Romans 8:25 speaks of it. If we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. Patience and purpose go hand in hand. They're slow, unyielding, and hard to hold. But once you've got them, they won't let go. Nelson Mandela knew about waiting. 27 years behind bars, locked away for fighting against the cruelty he saw around him. He had every reason to hate, to give up, to let his spirit die in that cell. But he didn't. He held on to hope, onto purpose, because he believed in something bigger than the prison walls, something more enduring than any punishment they could give him. And when he finally walked free, he brought with him a patience that had been tempered like steel. Patience isn't passive. It's not sitting around waiting for something to happen. It's living with intention, knowing that what you're waiting for matters, even if you can't see it. It's stepping into each day, each moment, with a quiet strength that doesn't waver, even when life gets heavy. It's trusting that your purpose is there, waiting to be found, even if it takes time. Faith teaches you to see beyond what's in front of you and to understand that there's a path, even when the way forward isn't clear. It's the understanding that your life is part of something bigger, a story that began long before you and will continue long after. And in that story, you have a role, a purpose that only you can fulfill. Not by rushing, not by forcing it, but by trusting that when the time is right, you'll know. The purpose isn't about grand achievements or titles. It's in the small choices, the quiet moments, the times when no one's watching. It's found in kindness, patience, in the courage to keep going when the world tells you to stop. It's in the way you live, the way you choose to show up day after day, even when the results don't come quickly. And maybe that's where divine favor steps in. Not in rewards or recognition, but in the sense of peace that comes from knowing you're where you're meant to be. There's a freedom in that, a release. You're not chasing something you don't need. You're simply living, letting your purpose unfold like a sunrise, slow and steady. So live with purpose. Trust in the journey, even when the road is long. Trust in the waiting, because with that patience, you'll find strength. And know that in every moment, you're exactly where you're meant to be, with a purpose that's just as real as the ground beneath your feet. A purpose that needs no explanation, but your willingness to embrace it. Continuous growth and transformation. Life doesn't stop, and neither should you. Growth is relentless. It's a fire that doesn't burn out, that keeps pushing, reshaping everything in its path. In Corinthians 4:16, it says, "Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day." It's a strange thing, this idea that as we grow older, we're also growing stronger on the inside, becoming something new, something refined. Think of the monks in the Tibetan highlands, men who wake each morning to meditate, to let their minds settle like calm water. Their lives are simple, their days quiet, but in that stillness, there's a power, a force as steady as the mountains around them. They aren't chasing change, but they're transforming all the same. Through their silence and their patience, they're renewed each day, becoming more centered and more resilient. They aren't running from the world, they're standing still within it, letting time shape them like stones in a river. Real growth doesn't rush. It doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, gradual, almost invisible. You don't see it in the moment, but over time you notice the change. You find that things that once seemed unbearable now don't hold the same weight. Challenges that used to throw you off course now barely ruffle your peace. That's the strength of transformation. It doesn't need to announce itself. It just becomes. Transformation is not about becoming something else. It's about finding who you are, stripping away the excess until what's left is true. You don't become perfect. You become real. Each day you learn a little more, grow a little stronger, and understand a little deeper. And it's in that daily renewal, that quiet shift, that you find the person you were always meant to be. The world tells you to change, to be something more. But growth is not about adding, sometimes it's about letting go. It's about releasing the things that weigh you down, the doubts, the fears, the need for approval. It's about trusting that who you are beneath all of that is enough. So let yourself be renewed day by day. Let each moment, each trial, polish you a little more. Life has a way of shaping you in ways you don't expect, in ways you can't see until you're on the other side. Trust that process, trust that each challenge, each hardship is carving something out of you, something resilient, something strong. In the end, transformation isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness. It's about looking back and seeing that every step, every struggle, led you to where you are and made you who you've become. And there's a beauty in that, a beauty that doesn't fade, a beauty that grows deeper with every passing day, renewing itself, finding strength in each new sunrise and the quiet promise it holds. Living boldly in faith. There's something about a life lived with purpose that you can't fake. It's in the way a person carries themselves, the way they meet the world head-on without apology. Faith does that to a person. It makes you bold, but not the kind of boldness that shouts or demands attention. No, it's a quiet thing, a strength that runs deep and doesn't waver. It's the kind of boldness that comes from knowing where you stand, from trusting that there's something greater at work. Think about the great ones, people like the Apostle Paul, who walked mile after mile, town after town, with nothing but his words and his faith. Or Mother Teresa, who gave up everything to walk among the poorest of the poor, to see them, to love them when no one else would. They weren't bold because they wanted fame. They were bold because they believed, because they knew that what they were doing mattered, even if no one ever saw it, even if no one ever remembered their names. That's what faith gives you. It's not about standing on a stage. It's about standing for something when the world around you shakes. It's about looking out into the unknown and stepping forward anyway. Not because you have all the answers, but because you believe in the one who does. Faith is the courage to keep moving when you don't know the way, the strength to keep giving when you're empty, and the love to keep reaching out even when it hurts. A life of faith is a life lived fully. It's not safe, it's not easy, but it's real. It's raw. You don't hide behind fear or caution. You live out loud, knowing that every day, every choice, every act of kindness builds something that will outlast you. And maybe that's the point. Faith isn't about what you can hold on to. It's about what you're willing to let go of, what you're willing to risk, knowing that there's more waiting for you than what you can see. So go boldly, live in a way that speaks of love and courage, a way that says you're not afraid to walk the hard road. Stand for the things that matter, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Let your life be the story that tells of faith, of hope, of a light that refuses to be dimmed. Because in the end, it's not the big moments that define a person. It's the small ones, the quiet acts of faith that no one else sees. It's in the kindness you give, the forgiveness you offer, the strength you share. That's the legacy of a life lived boldly in faith, a life that matters, a life that changes things, one quiet step at a time. Well, friends, that's our time for today. I hope it left you with something worth holding on to, something that sticks with you in the quiet moments. Faith is a funny thing. It's simple, but it runs deep. Maybe you found a piece of that today. As you step back into the world, I hope the day treats you well. I wish you good health, a little luck, and a lot of success. Life's got its rough edges, but you've got what it takes. And remember, we'll be here whenever you need a place to sit back and listen. If anything stirs a question or brings up a thought, don't keep it to yourself. Leave it here. Let's talk it through. Or maybe you've got your piece of the story to share. We'd like to hear it. And if this time together meant something to you, pass it along. Share it with a friend, a neighbor, or someone who needs a little light. So until we meet again, take care of yourselves, keep your faith close, and remember, you're never walking alone. Like, subscribe, and keep coming back. We'll be here. See you next time.